evening, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Fahraaz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. Now, one of the big stories that are, of course, happening this week in South Africa regards, of course, the EFF and their chanting of kill the Boer, kill the farmer. Now, the Supreme Court of Appeal will, on September the 4th, sit for the appeal against the Equality Court's finding that the EFF singing of kill the Boer was not hate speech. Civil rights organization Afriforum challenged the Equality Court's outcome after it lost its court bid, which acquitted EFF leader Julius Malema of hate speech for singing the struggle song. And on Saturday, he chanted it once again during the party's 10th anniversary. Joining us now is Afriforum's spokesperson for community safety, Jacques Broodryk. Jacques, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, Jacques, let's look at it this way here. So we have, of course, the Equality Court's ruling. There is, of course, in our justice system, the Supreme Court of Appeal. What had happened on Saturday with the chanting of this song? How much of grounds from a positive perspective does this give Afriforum when they do go ahead to the Supreme Court of Appeal?
That's an interesting question, and we'll have to see how the judge interprets that and whether it weighs into our case. But I think what's interesting about the matter and what convinces us that we do have a strong case is the fact that in the original Equality Court judgment, in the judgment itself, the judge indicated that another court might come to a different conclusion than he has. And I think that was pretty telling. It's not something you'd often read in judgments. It kind of opened the way that the judge said, listen, this is my interpretation, it might not be right. Usually judges are a bit more strict on their own judgments. They don't necessarily open it up to the possibility of appeal like he has. So we believe that we have a very strong case. And if you just look at the facts of the table, I mean, the chanting of this chant absolutely does come down to hate speech. If you look at the definition of what hate speech is, it's language that incites violence towards a specific group. And you cannot define this chant as anything else than that.
Jacques, looking at, of course, what had happened on Saturday, I think both you and I saw yesterday, there was a group of white South Africans that went into the headquarters, and of course a scuffle happened between certain EFF members. Taking that into account, and of course Saturday, how confident is Afriforum that they can be successful within the Supreme Court of Appeal?
Well, I think I first need to point out that the people who were involved in that scuffle are not Afriforum members.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. I was just looking at what had happened there yesterday.
Yeah. But I think it shows that the song is really stirring up emotions, unfortunately, and the fact that Mr. Malema and his supporters can just basically sing it is extremely insulting to many people on the ground. Many people who have lost family members in farm attacks, many people who have survived farm attacks, is a very real issue. It's not some straw man argument up in the air. It's people are bleeding on the ground in terribly violent ways. And this incitement is going to stir up more emotions if you don't bring an end to the singing of this chant.
Jacques, you know, obviously the farmers are, and, you know, this was without saying it from an exaggerated point of view, that they are really the breadline of us here in South Africa. How much protection now would they need given what had happened on Saturday? Because, and this is not talking about every single supporter within the EFF, but it just takes a group of them to go ahead and want to commit any supposed attacks on farmers. So how much of protection now would farmers need to have just after what had happened on Saturday? And of course the emotions, because a lot of this is built on emotions, that this can now trigger from one emotion to another for there to be some sort of bloodshed to occur.
I lost signal there for a moment for us. I'm going to interpret your question. I hope it's correct. So are you asking how much protection farmers need because of the singing of the song?
Yeah, at this very moment, because, you know, there's a lot of emotions that go into this, and it just takes someone to misinterpret a lot of the things to go ahead and have some sort of scuffle with farmers across the country.
I'm not concerned about the farmers in that regard. They've been dealing with this taunting and with the threat of farm attacks for many years now. I'm more concerned about people on the other side of the political spectrum, if you can call it that, might now feel emboldened by Mr. Malema chanting the song in front of thousands of his supporters. I mean, just after he chanted the song over the weekend, there were 2 more farm attacks, 1 more farm murder. Now, we've never argued that all of the cases of farm attacks and farm murders can be linked to this type of incitement, but there has definitely been evidence that many of these attacks have been directly linked to this type of incitement. So that's more my concern, that there are people on the ground who might now feel empowered because they see a senior political figure chanting the song and instructing them to kill and murder a certain part of the country's population.
Jacques, the Democratic Alliance, they're going to be going to the United Nations to file what had, of course, been said on Saturday as hate speech. Is Afriforum at this moment looking to join the DA in this application?
Our strategy at this stage is to simply first fight all the fights that we can fight on the South African court circuit, to see where that leads, because often when you take issues internationally, you get asked by bodies like the United Nations, have you remedied, to use all the remedies at your hand at disposal in the country of your origin. So that's why we need to fight this thing to the end here. If it ends up in the Constitutional Court, which I don't believe it will, but if it does, and even the Constitutional Court finds that it's hate speech, then we'll definitely approach someone like the United Nations or strengthen our international campaigns regarding this issue. Because, I mean, for a court to find something is legal or is allowed doesn't mean it's right. We know that apartheid was right under the laws of the time, but we know that it wasn't the right thing to do. And I think the same can be said about the singing of the song. So our approach is to first fight it in the South African courts as far as we can, while we're also strengthening our civilian safety structures. Afriforum has 168 civilian safety structures with roughly 10,000 trained volunteers countrywide. And those people are preparing and taking their community safety into their own hands. So we're building out those structures to prevent attacks. And then secondly, we're fighting this in the courts as well.
Jacques, given everything that has happened, and we want to look at it from a national perspective, how much involvement does national government now need to get in to make sure that, given all the stirring of emotions that are happening, that there needs to be protection for both groups, because there can be attacks and there can be retaliation. So how does national government now need to get involved to make sure that every group is protected with regards to this chant and, of course, the stirring of emotions?
National government should have gotten involved a long time ago, and they could have simply done that by changing their attitude towards farmers and whenever this issue arises. We know that President Cyril Ramaphosa himself in 2018 at the Davos meeting denied, in front of many members of the international media, denied that farm attacks were occurring in South Africa. When he's even taken part in debates in Parliament, for instance, where he's seen the stats, he knows that he's admitted that it has happened. When he had the chance to speak to the international media, he denied it. So he outright lied about it. And you can imagine that doesn't leave a very good taste in the people who are suffering because of these attacks in their mouths. So government should change their attitude towards farmers. They need to acknowledge this problem. Incompetent people like Minister Bekele shouldn't be allowed to go around and accusing farmers who get attacked of it being their own fault. He should be accusing the criminals. So that's where we need to start. We have a very good and well thought out rural safety plan that was designed by the South African Police Service with the inputs of role players, but that's simply not being implemented. There are various reasons for that. A lack of political will, a lack of resources, or resources being funneled to the wrong places, into politicians' pockets, for instance. So you sit with rural police stations that don't have a working vehicle and they can't respond to incidents. We have incidents where there was a farm attack and the police either show up 3 days later or they don't show up at all. So government needs to take this matter with the seriousness that it deserves, because we don't want to escalate. Like you said, we don't want to get into all kinds of tensions. This country is a country founded on a constitution which guarantees safety and freedom for all, and that is what Afriforum is trying to fight for. And it's high time that government starts taking a stance against this.
Jacques, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Have a great day.
You also have a good day. That's Jacques Broodryk, Afriforum spokesperson for community safety, of course. September the 4th, that date when the Supreme Court of Appeal will be hearing this. Now, after the break, I'll be chatting to Bilal Katrada, of course, IT Varsity, him being the founder of it. So we're asking the question, is it time for the digital age to take control of education so that our learners can, of course, enhance their sphere of education. He'll be my next guest here in studio. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live.